I parked down the block, like I always did. My parents' driveway was wide and clear, but something about walking those extra steps made me feel less exposed. The air was dry, evening light stretching long across the quiet Boulder neighborhood. Their porch light was already on, a warm yellow that should have felt welcoming. It didn't. When I reached the front door, I paused. Not because I was nervous. Not exactly. It was more like my body knew something before my mind did. Something was off. I knocked lightly, even though I had the code. 3 seconds passed before the door opened. "There you are." Astria smiled wide, teeth too perfect. Her tone was sweet, too sweet, like syrup poured over something bitter. "We thought maybe you changed your mind." I offered a polite nod. "Would have called if I had." Inside, the house was spotless. Every surface gleamed. The dining room was already set, polished silverware, folded napkins and symmetrical fans, matching wine glasses filled just enough to show forethought. Seraphine stood at the far end of the table, scrolling her phone, pretending not to care. Zinnia sat quietly, hands folded, gaze flickering toward me, then away, like I'd startled something. "I made your favorite," Astria called as she returned to the kitchen. "Lemon chicken. No garlic this time." I remembered. I didn't reply right away. My seat was already pulled out. I noticed the cranberry salad placed near my spot, the one I used to love when I was 12. A dish from a version of me they'd frozen in time. "Thanks," I said, sitting down, careful not to touch the glass. Zinnia cleared his throat. "So, how's the new place?" "Quiet," I replied. "Good for working." "Still freelancing?" he asked, tone neutral, like he was towing some unspoken line. I nodded. "Mostly, trying to launch a thing of my own." "Small scale?" Before I could elaborate, Seraphine chimed in without looking up. "Oh, by the way, I got featured on that startup podcast, the one you sent me a while back. They loved my pitch." I blinked. That pitch had been mine. Mine before I was pushed out. But I swallowed it. This wasn't the place. Astria beamed. "Isn't that just incredible? She's really come into her own." I forced a smile. "Sounds like it." "See, Seraphine knows how to make the most of opportunities," Astria continued, not quite looking at me now. "She doesn't wait around." I sat straighter. "I didn't wait. I walked away. That's different." A beat of silence followed. Zinnia shifted in his seat. Seraphine finally looked up. "Oh?" Astria said, too calm. "From what, exactly?" "From being erased," I said. "From working twice as hard for half the credit. From pretending silence is grace." That was when Astria slammed the table. The sound cracked through the room. Forks rattled. My water glass wobbled but didn't tip. Seraphine's eyes widened, and even Zinnia flinched. "In this house," Astria snapped, "we don't eat with failures." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room didn't move. Seraphine looked away. Zinnia exhaled slowly and pushed his chair back. "You can leave, Leora." The quiet that followed wasn't soft. It was judgmental. Hard. My chest felt tight, but I kept my face still. I stood. I didn't slam anything. I didn't argue. I looked at each of them. My sister with her polished facade, my father who still wouldn't meet my eyes, my mother standing like a queen defending her throne. I pushed in my chair. I left my plate untouched. No one followed me to the door. Outside, the temperature had dropped. I didn't feel it. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat there for a long moment with the engine off. There was something about that kind of rejection, so cold, so organized. It didn't sting. It carved. I stared out at the street. Thought about how some people lose their families to time, illness, tragedy. I'd lost mine while they were alive and well, sitting around a table, slicing lemon chicken. The first buzz of my phone made me flinch. Then another. I looked down. 1 missed call. Then 2. Then 5. By the time I pulled out of the neighborhood, it was 45. The road home blurred past my windows, the white lines stretching like thoughts I didn't want to finish. I drove in silence, the kind that doesn't comfort but crowds your mind. Every bump in the pavement felt personal. Each red light, a chance to ask myself why I had gone in the first place. My phone vibrated on the passenger seat. Once, then again. I didn't look. It wasn't until I pulled into my apartment lot that I glanced down. 2 missed calls. Astria's name first, then Seraphine. I left the engine running and just stared at the screen. For all the years they never called, now they couldn't stop. Inside, the apartment felt colder than usual. I locked the door twice and dropped my purse on the floor instead of hanging it on the hook. It was petty, sure, but everything in me itched for disorder. I needed the world to feel as tilted as it had become. My laptop lit up the second I opened it, and a ping echoed through the silence. Email from Elowen. Subject: Unusual login alert. Is everything okay? No, everything wasn't. I clicked. The message wasn't long, just a heads up that someone had tried to access our shared dev folder. It was time-stamped during dinner. While I was sitting at that cursed table, chewing on silence, someone had been digging through my files. I felt a pinch in my stomach. Not panic, not fear, recognition. I scrolled through my inbox. Another alert, then another. One from my cloud backup service. One from a banking app I hadn't touched in months. Failed login. Suspicious activity. Password reset attempt. My chest tightened, and I spoke out loud just to remind myself I could. They wouldn't. But they might. Astria had always prided herself on being prepared for anything. I used to think it was admirable. Now I wondered if she'd ever just been rehearsing control. The phone buzzed again. I didn't even flinch this time. I watched it light up. Zinnia, Seraphine, group chat, ping, ping. Ping. Are you home? We didn't mean it like that. Please, Leora, it's urgent. I turned the screen down. Not off, just face down. The knocks they once never gave, they were now pounding on a digital door I wasn't planning to open. A new notification pulled my eyes back to the laptop. Elowen again. This time, a voice memo. I clicked play. Hey, her voice came through low and steady. I'm not trying to alarm you, but they accessed the dev server. Not fully, just tried. Look, just be smart. You know what you're doing. Don't ignore this. I replayed it twice. The second time, I didn't blink. They weren't sorry. They were worried. Worried I knew more than I should. I didn't say anything. I just moved. 2 hours later, every password I had was changed. 2-factor authentication locked tighter than the front door. I encrypted every folder, moved sensitive data to an offline drive, and stored that drive in the one place I knew they never thought I'd still use, the freezer behind the old chili packs. I deleted the group chat, blocked every number. But right as I sat back, hand still on my mouse, a final notification appeared. Unknown login from your home network. The morning after the calls, I woke up with the kind of clarity that only comes after your world has cracked in half. I hadn't slept much, maybe 3 hours, but I didn't feel tired. I felt unfinished, like I'd walked out of a burning house with soot on my face and a question still smoldering in my chest. I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage I rented 10 minutes outside of town. It wasn't much, just a concrete unit with a roll-up door and a light that flickered whenever the wind passed too hard. But it held the things I couldn't fit into my new life. Old tax boxes, early prototypes, memories I wasn't ready to unpack. Until now. When the door creaked open, dust spilled into the air like a forgotten sigh. I stepped inside, brushing cobwebs off the nearest shelf. Somewhere under years of files and mislabeled bins, I found it, a blue spiral notebook, worn at the corners. My handwriting on the cover, slanted and crowded. Leora's journal, age 13. I sat on the concrete floor and opened it. The first few pages were harmless. Crushes on boys I don't remember. Doodles of shoes and haircuts I swore I'd get. Then came the list. March 14th. Didn't go to choir practice. Seraphine needed the car for piano. April 2nd. Used allowance to help Mom with groceries. May 9th. Asked Dad if I could get new jeans. He said Seraphine needed prom money. The ink was faded, but the pattern screamed. And then this. June 17th, my birthday. No one came home. Mom said Dad had a work dinner, and Seraphine had cheer, ate leftover spaghetti, drew a cake in the back. I flipped to the back of the journal. A sketch, childish and clumsy, of a round cake with a candle. One, just one. I whispered to the empty garage. They've been rewriting this story for years. I just didn't read the fine print. I stood, took the journal with me, and scanned the other boxes. Old college essays, broken keychains, a certificate for a robotics competition I'd won sophomore year, signed by a teacher who once told me I had leadership instincts. I smiled at that, briefly. As I packed the journal away, a memory surfaced from a visit 2 months ago, just a quick drop-in. I'd brought coffee for Astria and left it on the counter while she was on a call. As I walked through the hallway, something caught my eye. The family wall. All the same frames, same order. But mine was missing. In its place, Seraphine's graduation photo, center stage, Astria and Zinnia on either side, all in matching navy. The frame was larger than the others, intentionally so. I hadn't said anything that day. I remember thinking maybe they'd just moved mine, maybe the glass broke. Now I wasn't so generous. Back in the garage, I pulled out an old shoebox marked Photos. I dug through Polaroids, party snaps, Thanksgiving candids, until I found the one I remembered. All of us at the dinner table, years ago. Me on the left, Seraphine next to me, Zinnia carving a turkey, Astria laughing mid-sentence. I held the print up to the flickering light, and I froze. The edges were clean, too clean, cropped. In the version hanging at the house, I wasn't in it. They didn't forget me. They removed me. I stood there, fingers trembling, heart beating with something between heartbreak and heat. Not just silence, erasure. What is family if you have to earn your space in the photo? I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything. The journal pages, the certificate, the cropped photo, one by one. Every piece of proof that I'd existed in their world once, that I wasn't some story they could retell with a cleaner ending. Someone once told me, family isn't who shares your blood, it's who doesn't erase you when you fall. I didn't know if that person had ever felt like this, like they'd been deleted. But I knew I wouldn't let it end that way. By the time I loaded the last box into my trunk, the sun was overhead, warming the cracked pavement. I didn't cry. I'd done that already. I texted Elowen. I found something. Not digital, but real. Tangible. My phone buzzed back almost instantly. Then came her reply. Then it's time to look closer at what they took. Monday came with a false sense of stillness. The kind of quiet that pretends nothing happened, until it does. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when a notification popped up on my phone. It was a forwarded event flyer, sent from a woman I hadn't spoken to in months. Thought you'd be interested, her message said. No emojis, just the flyer. A local startup showcase, hosted by Boulder's Tech Incubator. And right in the center of the digital graphic, like a badge of honor, was Seraphine's name. Featured speaker, headline slot, product showcase. The product, mine. I stared at it longer than I should have, rereading the tagline I once crafted for our launch page. Bridging systems, building trust. My words, her name. They always told me I was too intense, too sharp, too much. So I learned to lower my voice. Take turns, let others shine. I dialed myself down. And now, she was wearing the mic. I didn't RSVP. I just showed up. The event center buzzed with optimism and ego. Lanyards flashed under fluorescent lights, and people greeted each other like they were old friends in a town with short-term memory. I kept to the back row, tucked behind a man wearing a hoodie that said, "Founders hustle harder." Seraphine took the stage with perfect posture and a soft smile that masked every sharp edge she'd ever shown behind closed doors. Her presentation was smooth, scripted, deliberate. Slide after slide mirrored what I had once stayed up all night building. Every design element, every quote, even the rhythm of the pitch, identical. "She's so inspiring," a woman whispered behind me. "Can you believe she did all this herself?" I clenched my jaw. My hands stayed folded. My legs didn't move. And then, as if the universe were daring me to stand up, the moderator handed her a trophy. "Future of Women in Tech," the plaque read. Lightweight, symbolic, and yet, it knocked the wind out of me because I recognized it. And the curve of the base, the scratch near the corner, the tarnish along the side. That trophy used to sit in our living room on a shelf near the fireplace. It had been mine. An academic award from junior year, a moment no one had cared much about at the time, and now it said, Seraphine D. The room applauded. People stood. I stood too, but I walked out. I didn't look back. Didn't wait to see if she noticed I had been there. Outside, the wind hit my face like a truth I didn't want to swallow. My car felt too small for my thoughts. I sat behind the wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing, remembering. The day I won that trophy, Astria had said, "Well, let's hope you remember grades aren't everything." Zinnia didn't even show up. Seraphine had taken my last slice of cake that night, saying, "You don't really need it, right?" I hadn't. Not then. But now I needed this moment to mean something, because it wasn't just about credit anymore. They didn't just give her credit, they gave her my past. I pulled out my phone, Googled her name and the product name, dozens of results. She was featured in 2 business podcasts. She'd done a Reddit AMA titled Ask Me Anything about founding a startup from scratch. My name? Not one mention. This is what erasure looks like. Not a clean break, not a scream, but a slow redirection of the spotlight until you disappear from your own stage. I drove back home without the radio on. At my kitchen table, I opened my old development files, original timestamps, version notes, sketches with my initials. I flipped open a notebook, wrote down the product name in bold marker. Underneath it, I wrote, original logs, backed up, time-stamped. I tapped the pen against the page, thinking of all the hands that had clapped for her this morning. Let's see how they clap when the real story drops. It started with a phone call from someone who sounded like they were tiptoeing around a landmine. Hi, this is Ryan Elston with the Boulder Ledger. We'd spoken briefly a while back about your story, about your role in the Vedanta platform. I stepped out of the library and leaned against the stone wall near the bike racks, the breeze catching a strand of hair I didn't bother tucking behind my ear. Yeah, I said, squinting toward the street. I remember. Ryan hesitated. Just making sure. I've got notes here that you withdrew from the company 6 months ago, cited burnout and creative differences. I froze. No, I said slowly. I never said that. I never wrote that. There was another pause, this one thicker. Huh. Okay. Sorry. It's just, I got a statement last month through your email. Said you were no longer doing interviews, that you didn't want to be affiliated. My stomach dropped. Can you forward me that email? I asked. Sure, he said. Just wanted to confirm. I hung up, walked quickly to my car, and opened my inbox before even turning the engine. Ryan's email came through almost immediately. There it was, sent from my address, using my old formatting style. Dear press contacts, thank you for reaching out regarding the Vedanta platform. At this time, I am no longer affiliated with the team and have no interest in participating in media coverage. I respectfully ask that you direct future inquiries to Seraphine D. Warmly, Lyora D. My name, my tone, my digital signature. I stared at the screen, fingers curling tight. That wasn't just interference, that was impersonation. Back at the apartment, I called Valora. She picked up after 2 rings. Hey stranger, she said. You never call unless something's on fire. It is, I said. I explained everything. The email, the call from the journalist, the forged public narrative. I need to know if this is enough to build a case, I finished. Or if it's just more emotional damage they'll get away with. Valora was quiet for a beat. Come by tomorrow. Bring every contract you ever signed, anything with your name on it. The next morning, I showed up at her firm with a binder I'd pulled from the freezer. Yes, the freezer, where I'd hidden it behind an old bag of blueberries. I wasn't taking chances anymore. We sat in a small, glass-walled conference room, sun leaking across the table. Valora wore her glasses low on her nose as she flipped through the documents. Then she stopped. Lyora, she said carefully. This signature. This isn't your hand. I leaned in. It was my name, sure, but the slope of the L was different. The flourish I always used on the D was missing. Are you sure? I'm a lawyer, she said flatly. I have a folder on my desktop labeled Forgeries That Think They're Clever. Yes, I'm sure. My breath caught. I flipped to the top page, Transfer of Intellectual Property Agreement. Dated 4 months ago, the same week I had dropped off boxes at my parents' place after the lease on my old place expired. They had access, I whispered. They knew exactly where everything was. Valora looked up. This is criminal, not just shady. Something in me snapped. Not from pain this time, but from strategy. They didn't just want to hurt me. They wanted to replace me, silently, without mess, without noise. Well, that silence had expired. That night, I opened every device I owned, pulled timestamps, emails, version histories. I even dug out an old USB stick with the original backend code I'd developed. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was documenting. By midnight, my dining table was covered in paper, and my Google Drive had 2 new folders labeled Evidence and Weaponry. Just as I was saving the last PDF, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered. You don't know me, the voice said. Male. Calm. But I know what your parents did. And I have proof. I woke to the vibration of my phone, not from a call, but from a relentless cascade of notifications. My screen lit up like a warning flare, too bright for the still dark morning. One message after another popped up. Mentions, reposts, tags. For a moment, I thought another leak had hit the press. Maybe the legal complaint had slipped out early. But when I opened my browser and typed in Seraphine's name, the search bar finished the query for me. Seraphine D. How I Built from Nothing. It was everywhere. A slick, overly produced video, uploaded overnight and already clocking more than 100,000 views. A motivational talk she'd given at some conference I'd never heard about. I clicked. She stood there on stage in a soft pink blazer, hair styled in a polished, effortless wave, her voice smooth, her tone rehearsed. Sometimes, the best tech ideas come from listening to your intuition, she said. I had no funding, no network. Just a dream and the drive to build it from scratch. My stomach turned. I whispered to the screen. That was my line, word for word. The background visuals shifted to showcase the product's development timeline. Same design, same branding, even the mocked-up wireframes I had personally built in Illustrator 2 years ago. But not once was my name spoken, not even in passing. A text buzzed in. It was May, an old colleague turned friend, someone who'd seen me through coffee-fueled nights during early-stage testing. She sent a screenshot. You seen this? It was an Amazon listing, Seraphine's new ebook, Lead Like a Lady, How I Built My Startup from Scratch, #1 in Women's Entrepreneurship sticker in the corner. The outline listed beneath the title wasn't just familiar. It was mine. Lifted word for word from the private workshop packet I'd created years ago, one I'd sent to Astria for feedback, back when I still believed she wanted me to win. I couldn't breathe. Every cell in me felt like it was being scrubbed out with bleach. I shot off an email to the publishing platform, attached my original time-stamped file, politely requested a content investigation. No reply. Then I did something I never do. I commented under the video. Just a single sentence. This deck was originally written by Leora D., filed 2 years prior. Documentation available. That was all it took. The replies poured in within minutes. Bitter much? Let your sister have her moment. Sounds like jealousy. She's the one who made it happen. Your own family says you quit. No one kicked you out. One message stood out more than the others. Your own family says you left the company willingly. Sounds like you're bitter. I closed the laptop and just stared at the ceiling. That line, that specific wording, it wasn't internet rage, it was planted, strategic. They were building a narrative while I was still trying to survive the chapter. I got up, made coffee, and opened a clean legal pad. Drew a timeline with 4 columns, product versions, email threads, legal docs, and things they forgot I saved. I whispered to no one. They took the surface, but I kept the root. I started attaching screenshots, linking drafts, printing logs. I wasn't a victim. I was a vault. By afternoon, I had a working timeline, cross-referenced with contracts and emails I had archived out of habit. There were gaps, yes, but the pattern was sharp, intentional. Then came the email, no name, just a subject line. You need to see this. Inside was a single line. They think you won't speak. I have footage you should see. And an attachment, securitycam.mp4. I hesitated, then clicked. The screen went black, then loaded with grainy footage, a timestamp, a familiar hallway. And then, Astria. Entering a room she had no business being in, the video file loaded in slow, stuttering frames, as if the truth needed time to crawl out. At first, the image was murky, an overhead angle of a reception desk. I recognized the space almost instantly. Carter Finch Legal Associates, the firm that had once drafted my parents' estate planning documents. Then, Astria walked into frame. She moved with her usual self-importance, handbag close to her chest like a shield. She leaned toward the receptionist, lips moving, voice too soft for the camera's mic. Then the receptionist slid a clipboard across the counter. The camera zoomed, accidentally or not, I don't know, but just enough to catch one line typed clearly on the top sheet. Guardianship Inquiry, Lyora D. I paused the video, sat back. They didn't just want silence from me. They wanted to own my choices, legally. The next morning, I sat across from Valora in a booth at a quiet cafe off Pearl Street, the kind with brick walls and overpriced green juice. I showed her the footage without saying a word. When it ended, she didn't look surprised, just quietly furious. I pulled court inquiry logs this morning, she said, flipping open her tablet. Astria's name is on 2 preliminary evaluations filed last month. Mental capacity assessment forms, unsigned but time-stamped. I looked down at the table, my fingers wrapped around the base of my teacup. She wanted to take my decisions away. On paper. Yeah, Valora said. That's exactly what it looks like. My throat went dry. Not from sadness, rage maybe, but deeper than that. Like something you only feel when someone's mapped out your erasure on legal letterhead. Back at home, I dug through my messages, scrolling until I found one from 2 months ago. Astria. Hey, have you ever considered doing a mental wellness check? Just to process everything. I could set up an appointment for you. It had felt kind at the time. Supportive even. I was mid-burnout, and I didn't think twice. I had gone. Once. I opened my old email and found the therapist's name. Dr. June Maller. I booked a follow-up. She met me in a modest office with ivy curling across the windows. I explained why I was there, honestly, directly. I didn't mention Astria at first, but halfway through I asked, "Did my mother contact you before I came?" Dr. Maller hesitated, just long enough. She offered some background context, she said slowly. Family concern, mostly. What did she say? There was that pause again, longer this time. She implied you had been erratic, that you were disconnected from reality, that your work habits were obsessive and damaging. I didn't blink. Did I ever present that way to you? No, she said. But her framing shaped the intake. I didn't realize until now. It was like watching puzzle pieces snap into place. The emails, the forged resignation, the guardianship. Now this. It wasn't just malice. It was calculated. They weren't worried I'd fall apart. They were terrified I'd put myself back together without them. I left the office without another word. No handshakes, no thank yous, just the feeling of being watched in every step I'd taken over the last year. Back home, I began pulling files again. This time not to prove I built anything, but to prove how they tried to dismantle me. I labeled folders by month, stamped screenshots, recorded voice memos. I built a digital mirror they'd soon be forced to look into. If they wanted to portray me as broken, I'd show them the blueprint of their efforts. Hours passed. I didn't notice the time, only the quiet. Then, just as I finished compiling a folder labeled Therapist, my phone buzzed. A new text from Valora. We're ready to file, but I think you should deliver it in person. Astria's email was short, almost sterile. Dinner at the house, just us. Let's talk. Saturday, 7 p.m. No subject line, no sentiment, but the message was clear. An invitation cloaked in civility. I didn't reply. I just showed up. When I arrived, the house looked exactly as it had 6 months ago. Same perfect hedges, same porch light glowing a little too early. As I walked up the driveway, I pictured the photo they once cropped me out of hanging on the wall inside. This time, I'd be there in person, whether they liked it or not. The door opened before I knocked. Seraphine stood there, dressed down in a cashmere sweater, hair too perfectly undone. She gave a tight smile and stepped aside. "We're just plating up," she said. Zinnia nodded toward me from his usual seat at the head of the table. Astria brought out the roast like this was Thanksgiving, her face pulled into that rehearsed expression she used at charity galas. "Lyora, you look rested," she said. "The time away seems to have done you well." "Apparently so," Zinnia added, pouring himself wine. "You working again? Back on your feet?" I took my seat without answering. The room smelled of rosemary and garlic. The tension was baked in. They expected tears. I brought receipts. Dinner started in silence. Forks scraped ceramic. Seraphine kept checking her phone under the table, as if waiting for someone to text her an escape plan. "We wanted to clear the air," Astria finally said. "There's been a lot of misunderstanding. This family's been through enough." I looked at her. Misunderstanding implies there was an honest version to begin with. Zinnia cleared his throat, but said nothing. Seraphine looked down. I reached into my coat and pulled out my phone. Set it on the table, pressed play. The audio filled the room instantly, sharp and unavoidable. She always blacks out after one drink. Just unlock her phone, she won't remember. The voices, clear. Astria, Zinnia. And Seraphine's short laugh right after. Zinnia gripped the edge of the table. Seraphine's face drained of all color. Astria blinked. Once, slow. I didn't say a word. I let the silence choke them. Then I slid an envelope across the table, sealed and stiff. Zinnia reached for it like it was hot to the touch. Inside, the official court filing. Valora's name at the top. Charges: theft of intellectual property, forgery, biometric misuse, defamation. "This isn't revenge," I said, voice calm. "This is prevention." Astria's composure cracked first. "You're making this worse than it ever had to be." "You did that yourselves," I said. "I'm just documenting it." Seraphine finally looked up. Her voice was small, almost breaking. "You wouldn't do this to us." I met her eyes. "You already did it to me." The room stood still again, like it had at that dinner long ago. Then Astria stood, napkin falling from her lap. Her voice was low and shaking, not with fear, but fury. "Then you've declared war." 1 week after the dinner, I stood outside the Boulder courthouse building, watching a group of pigeons fight over a dropped bagel. The world around me buzzed with weekday normalcy, court staff rushing past, lawyers in charcoal suits, people sipping coffee like the universe wasn't shifting under someone's feet. But for me, everything had tilted. The email from Valora had come through that morning. "Case accepted. State investigator assigned. Hearings to be scheduled." Just 3 lines. And yet, I read them over a dozen times, like they were a spell that kept me standing. Seraphine and Astria had been subpoenaed. Zinnia was listed as a named party in the motion. I hadn't expected that, but I didn't argue it either. They wanted this quiet. Now the whole town was whispering. At home, I kept the curtains drawn and the laptop open. I wasn't hiding. I just didn't want the sun pretending it was a normal day. Notifications rolled in steadily. Some I ignored, some I read twice. I noticed a pattern in my inbox. PR firms, content removals, people scrambling to clean digital footprints. And then there was an email from Ryan, the same journalist who'd been stonewalled months ago. Subject: "Still want to go public?" I read it, closed the tab, and didn't reply. The facts were loud enough. They didn't need my commentary. That night, Valora called me. I answered on speaker, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. "Found something," she said. She forwarded a copy of a resignation email, supposedly from me, sent to investors and advisors 6 months earlier. The timestamp? One day after I'd confronted Seraphine privately about credit theft. The subject line read, "Stepping away to prioritize mental health." I felt my jaw tighten. Inside the body of the email, a gentle goodbye, full of gratitude, closing with, "Please contact Seraphine D. for any future matters related to the company." My name, my voice, my ghost. "They didn't just erase me from the company," I said to Valora. "They tried to erase me from ambition itself." She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. By the end of that week, Seraphine was asked to temporarily step down from her CEO role. The board had met under quiet urgency. Investors didn't comment publicly, but money moves louder than words. An internal email leaked 2 days later. Someone anonymous, probably one of her assistants. Subject: Urgent. Any exposure on old files or voice recordings? I stared at the screenshot, forwarded to me via encrypted email. I didn't smile. Some victories don't require applause, just documentation. On Friday, Valora finalized the filings. I watched her upload everything into the state's online portal. I didn't flinch when she clicked submit. I just asked, "Can you send me a hard copy for records?" She nodded. Later that afternoon, I drove through my old neighborhood, slower than usual. My parents' house still stood tall behind its manicured hedges, but the curtains were shut tight. That never used to happen. Astria believed light was a sign of life. Now the house looked like a mausoleum of denial. As I passed, a neighbor I barely knew waved at me from her porch. I nodded back but didn't stop. Some gestures weren't for acceptance, just acknowledgement. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky was painted in a soft orange haze, like the universe was offering a quiet apology. I parked, grabbed my bag, opened the door. There, on the floor just inside, was a cream-colored envelope. No name, just handwritten cursive across the back, from Amanda. My cousin. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Inside was a wedding invitation. Gold leaf details, cursive fonts, RSVP link. But tucked into the envelope was something else, a yellow sticky note. "Some of us always believed you. We just didn't know how to say it." I sat down on the couch, holding that note in my hand. It was barely 3 inches wide. Not legal, not binding, but it carried more weight than any court ruling ever would. 2 weeks after the papers were filed, I sat in the back row of Courtroom 2C, hands folded, heart calm. The room buzzed with the quiet tension that only legal buildings seem to carry, a mix of recycled air and withheld truth. Astria was seated beside her attorney, her hair perfectly arranged, her face unreadable. Zinnia stared ahead, arms crossed tightly. Seraphine sat farther down, visibly smaller than I remembered. Her heels didn't touch the floor. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Valora didn't make a dramatic entrance. She was already there, already prepared. I watched her pull a slim flash drive from her folder and hand it to the court clerk with the same ease someone might offer gum. "This," she said, "is security footage submitted by a confidential source." The screen flickered to life. It showed my old apartment. My couch. Me, curled under a blanket, eyes closed. Astria leaned over me slowly, her hand reaching down to gently lift my wrist. Then, clearly, deliberately, she pressed my thumb against my phone. I watched myself sleep through it. Watched them violate not just my trust, but my very fingerprint. Gasps rippled. Zinnia turned to whisper something to his lawyer. Seraphine's eyes filled, but she looked away, hands clenched in her lap. The judge adjusted his glasses, paused the video, then looked up. "We'll proceed with fast track on civil biometric violation and fraud. Criminal review is pending with state investigators." No one moved. Valora didn't need to say another word. That video had already said enough. It wasn't just theft. It was trespass. Against my autonomy, my body, my safety, and now it was public record. By the time we left the courthouse, a local news crew was already outside, camera ready, anchors clutching printed scripts they hadn't memorized yet. Valora shielded me from them with her body. I didn't speak, I didn't smile, I just walked. That night, a Boulder Gazette headline read, "Family Tech Empire Faces Biometric Scandal." For the first time, the comments beneath it didn't ask if I was unstable or bitter. They said, "She was right all along." Disgusting what they did. I hope she sues them blind. I didn't reply to any of them. One investor pulled out of Seraphine's venture the next morning. Another postponed a deal indefinitely. I watched it happen from my kitchen table, spoon halfway to my mouth. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't even satisfied. I just felt free. Victory, I'd come to realize, isn't about destroying someone. It's about no longer needing their validation to breathe. I opened a blank doc on my laptop titled First Draft, Frame Forward. A new project, a new platform. Small, but mine. No noise, no permission, just purpose. Later that week, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a printed still from the surveillance video, my mother lifting my hand. Beneath it, in handwriting, I recognized instantly, "They trained me to do this to you. I'm done being trained." Seraphine. 3 weeks had passed since the hearing, but the weight didn't lift. It shifted. It settled. Like a stone, you finally stop trying to push uphill and decide to walk around instead. That Sunday, I found myself at the edge of the same park we used to picnic in when I was a kid. The same cracked bench under the same aging tree. Families laughed nearby. Dads holding toddlers on their shoulders, couples tossing frisbees lazily across open grass. I sat down slowly, the way you lower into a memory you don't trust anymore. Astria used to say, "What's broken can always be fixed." She'd usually say it when she was gluing something for Seraphine, a trophy that fell, a picture frame with a loose corner. Not once did she ever say it about me. Some things weren't meant to be re-glued. Some things are meant to be left broken, because they were never whole to begin with. That afternoon, I returned home to find the envelope again, Seraphine's note, still folded neatly on my desk. I reread the sentence that had haunted me since it arrived. "They trained me to do this to you. I'm done being trained." It wasn't an apology. There was no "I'm sorry," no remorse wrapped in justification, just recognition. Maybe not repentance, but maybe a kind of resignation. Or maybe she was finally stepping out of her own script, the one our mother had written for both of us. I set the note down and left it there, untouched. That week, Amanda's wedding came. I hadn't planned to go, but something about that yellow sticky note she'd sent me, the one that said, "Some of us always believed you," kept buzzing in my head. Not like hope, not even like validation, just proof I wasn't invisible to everyone. So I went. I didn't dress to stand out, no dramatic entrance. I took a seat near the back of the reception hall, the kind where no one looks unless they're scanning for the restroom. The whispers started as soon as I sat down. A few glances, some stiff smiles. One uncle turned his back, but then one aunt, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, passed behind my chair and paused. She leaned in and said quietly, "You didn't deserve any of that." I looked up and replied, steady, "No one does." I stayed through the speeches, the first dance, and left before the cake. It was enough. That night, back in my apartment, I did what I should have done years ago. I blocked my mother's number. Not just silenced it, blocked it, gone. I deleted the group chat entirely. No archived copy, no screenshots. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a bridge, it's a fence. Not to keep others out, but to keep yourself safe inside. A few days later, I walked into my new co-working space. I'd been building something quietly for months now, a small accelerator program for women in tech who had been pushed out, talked over, or quietly erased like I had. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't on any 30 under 30 list, but it was mine. A new name on the door, Frame Forward Labs. A small plaque sat on my desk, engraved words I'd chosen myself. Every rebuild starts with one honest brick. I ran my finger across it, sat down, logged in. No more noise, no more family name hovering like a ghost. Later that evening, after shutting my laptop, I remembered the envelope I'd sealed last year, addressed to myself in case I ever forgot who I was. The label on the front said, "If you ever think of going back." I opened it. One line, handwritten. "You are already enough." I held the letter in my hands for a long while before placing it on my nightstand. Then I stood up, faced the mirror across the room, and for the first time in a long time, I whispered, "And now, I believe it." The gallery was small, tucked between a yoga studio and an overpriced vegan cafe in downtown Boulder. I almost missed the sign, "Voices in Tech, a curated retrospective." I wasn't there as a guest of honor. I wasn't listed in the brochure. But May, the same friend who had texted me screenshots in the early days, had told me to stop by. I wandered through the exhibit slowly, letting the curated lighting soften the sharp edges of memory. Black and white portraits of women founders, annotated timelines of innovations, startup milestones pinned to the wall like battle ribbons. Then I saw it. A frame, wood-stained, gold-trimmed, familiar. Inside, a photo I hadn't seen in years. Our family, Thanksgiving 2011, everyone seated around the table. And there I was, still in the picture, not cropped, not faded out, not missing. Below it, a small printed caption. "Not everyone who disappears was forgotten. Some were erased." I didn't move. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I didn't put it there. Someone else did. And that was enough. The next morning, the final court notice arrived. Certified envelope. Valora had told me it was coming, but seeing the seal on the front still made my chest tighten. The ruling was clear. Astria was fined $75,000 in civil penalties. Zinnia was barred from managing financial accounts related to the company or any of its subsidiaries. Seraphine, my sister, my ghostwriter, my replacement, was restricted from representing any family business for 5 years. No jail time, no press conference, no parade. Justice didn't roar. But it echoed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post a victory dance on social media. But that afternoon, I logged into my long-abandoned LinkedIn account, clicked Add New Post. One image, the original wireframe sketch of the Vedenta dashboard. One caption, built, stolen, proven, reclaimed. No hashtags, no @mentions. Within 2 days, it had been reposted over 20,000 times. Someone DM'd me asking, "Do you want to give an interview?" I replied, "The story already told itself." A week later, a nonprofit I used to mentor with reached out, asking if I'd be willing to write a short guest essay for their monthly newsletter. I said yes. The title I submitted, "To Everyone Who Was Erased and Wrote Themselves Back In." A few lines stood out to readers. They emailed to tell me, "Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door, it means locking it without hate. We aren't weak for leaving, we're wise for not begging to stay." I printed the essay and pinned it above my new desk. That same afternoon, I stood outside my new office, a modest loft space with glass windows and a view of the foothills. The sign read, "Frame Forward Labs." Inside, a young intern passed me a coffee I didn't order. "You're the reason I applied," she said, then ducked her head like she'd said too much. I didn't correct her. I just smiled, not softly, proudly. At dusk, I returned home and kicked off my shoes by the door. My phone buzzed on the counter. The name flashing on the screen made my breath catch. Astria. I let it ring, watched it light up and blink and wait. Then I hit decline, deleted the number. There are calls that deserve silence, and silences that say everything.